Good evening, I'm Jose Candelario, and this is LatinX Tonight, where we just don't report the news, we unravel the stories behind the sound bites, especially when they touch la integridad, la cultura, la comunidad. It's September 23rd, 2025, and we begin with what's happening now, because the Americas are moving and Latinx voices are pushing the tides of power, policy, and human dignity. Our top story tonight, reverse migration. It's a phrase that sounds like a plot twist from a bad movie, but guess what? They're heading back. But for thousands of Venezuelans, it's not fiction, it's brutal reality. Meet Mariela Gomez, 36-year-old mother of two who recently spent 17 hours riding atop gas tanks on a cargo boat from Jaque, Panama to Jurado, Colombia. That's right, gas tanks. Because if there's anything worse than a long family road trip, it's doing it by boat, inhaling diesel fumes while clinging to the hope that this journey is somehow safer than staying still. Why was she there? Because U.S. immigration policy has tightened again. Routes that once seemed open have closed. Doors that once appeared possible are now padlocked. And thousands of Venezuelan migrants, people who risk everything to head north, are turning back south. Now here's some key numbers. 14,000 migrants, mostly Venezuelans, have returned from Central America since the latest crackdown. These are countries from Panama, Costa Rica, Colombia, that are seeing reverse flows. And here's the kicker. Safer routes cost about $280 per person, but most families can only scrape together around $80. So instead of ferries, it's cargo boats. Instead of comfort, it's risk. Instead of life jackets, it's prayers. Because we've been sold this idea that migration is always one way, north to the north, right? To the U.S., to the American dream, but migration is like a pendulum and swings back when laws, borders, or brute force push hard enough. And behind every statistic is a kid choking on ocean spray, a mother calculating which bill not to pay, a father asking himself if survival is worth the humiliation of going back. And it raises the real questions. Who is responsible? The U.S. government making the rules, the Central American countries caught in the middle, or the international agencies trying to triage on a bleeding artery? Now, I usually promise that we stick to one immigration story, but we've already covered that. But let's sit in it for a little bit longer. Legal policies changes aren't abstract. They ripple outward. A new line in D.C., a tweak in asylum rules in Texas, it shows up as a crowded boat in Panama. It shows up as families stranded in Colombia. It shows up in Mariela Gomez's terrified kids. That's the cost. And it's not just dollars, it's trauma. It's lost years, it's illnesses untreated. It's the quiet, grinding violence of being told you don't belong anywhere. And yet they endure, which is why these stories matter. Now, while some people are physically moving, others are fighting to preserve identity and memory right here where they stand. In Richmond, Virginia, yes, that Virginia, where Latino culture usually gets boiled down to how spicy do you want your salsa, there's an exhibition called Hilos Heredados, or Inherited Threads. It features 19 Latinx artists, many of them who have immigrant roots, confronting everything from ancestry and spirituality to queerness and mental health. It's free, it's self-funded, it's small but fierce, like a chihuahua with a paintbrush. Because when politics erases history, art revives it. Because for many of us, growing up means hearing two sets of stories, one from our parents, half myth, half truth, and one from the mainstream media, half stereotype, half erasure. Exhibits like Hilos Heredados fill the silence in between. They say, we are here, and we are telling our own damn story. Hilos Heredados. Beyond the paintings and ceramics, there's a piece on the wall that reads, America was built by immigrants, which, sure, is something every bumper sticker has screamed since the 1980s. But inside that gallery, framed by looms and textiles, it feels fresh. It feels like a dare. It feels like we're still building and you can't bulldoze us out of history. That art as protest, art as affirmation, art as both a middle finger and abrazo. Well, now let's move on to sports, or as my tío calls it, the only reason to own the TV. Leyanis Pérez, Hernández from Cuba, just leapt into history with a 14.94-meter triple jump, the longest of the year. Cuba isn't often in the spotlight of global athletics, but Leyanis basically said, spotlight, I am the spotlight. Then there's Caio Bonfim of Brazil, who just gave his country its first global gold in the men's 20-kilometer race walk. You know, those guys that are just shugging along there, moving those shoulders, moving it, not really running, but moving really fast. Let's pause on that. Race walking, a sport that looks like your abuela power walking through the mall, but requires ungodly endurance. He clocked 1 hour, 18 minutes, and 35 seconds, proving once again that Brazilians don't just samba, they hustle. Mexico, Alegna Gonzalez fought hard. Spain's Maria Pérez snagged the gold in a women's walk race. But the bigger story, Latin America is no longer the underdog in track and field. We're breaking records, not just maracas. Meanwhile, closer to home, Latino students, athletes in U.S. colleges hit an all-time high, 38,654 in 2025. That's up 62% in just a decade. They now make up 7% of all NCAA athletes. And that's not a side note, that's a movement. And it's not just players, it's fans. Nielsen found that 70% of Latino sports fans are Gen Z or millennials, compared to about 50% overall, which means the future of sports, it's bilingual, it's streaming, and it's probably watching where eating Cheetos con limon leagues, brands, commissioners, they're finally waking up to what we've known for years. Latino fans aren't a niche, we are the heartbeat. So what do these stories combined tell us? Well, migration is not one directional. Policy doesn't just create borders, it creates trauma, resilience, and sometimes return journeys nobody planned. Latinx identity is not one thing. It's artists in Richmond, athletes in Havana, migrants on boats, students in the NAACP locker rooms. The youth are rising. They're painting and competing, studying and dancing, and they're refusing to wait for permission. And representation matters. Not just who's on the field, but who's telling the stories, who funds the galleries, and who gets to decide what American means. And there's one thing I want you to carry into your day, is this. Despite the challenges, migration, inequality, funding gaps, our people are building, creating, reclaiming. Latinx communities across the Americas are not passive witnesses to history. We are the architects of it. Thank you for joining Latinx Tonight. I'm Jose Candelario. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and keep believing en nuestra fuerza. I'm Jose Candelario, and buenas noches.